Well, I want to make two comments. One is Marlene Garcia mentioned who the leaders are, and we're not above using community college connections. Darrell Steinberg's father teaches at Skyline College, a community college in the Bay Area, and I've told him if he wasn't good to us, I'd just call his father. And Bob Dutton's wife is a faculty member at Chaffey College in the health careers area. So of the four leaders, we know that two of them have very intimate connections with community colleges, and I'm not suggesting that John Paris and Martin Garrick aren't also good friends for community college. I just thought I'd mention that. Let me talk a minute about the jobs bills that Marlene Garcia talked about. One was energy management, and it's authored by Cedillo, and these are bills that the President pro tem of the Senate has put forward as jobs bills. And that energy management bill is I believe it's going to touch 45 or 47 community colleges. It will establish energy management systems in those colleges and may well decrease the energy cost in those colleges as much as 30%. Because when you have an energy management system, you're able to find out, well, really, we don't need those lights on as much as we thought we would, or we could cut down on the air conditioning or all those other things. It specifically we will have it in 47 community colleges, and that's all the money that was available. And they picked the 47 community colleges that were in the areas of highest unemployment and in the areas where they also had the highest rate of foreclosure. So that's going to be, if that bill goes through, and it went through rather easily in the Senate, it'll be a real boost to community colleges and lowering our energy costs. Plus, it gives training to those students who are in the energy management business. Now, the other one is strictly a training bill. It's authored by Alquist, Senator Alquist, and it has to do with high-speed rail, but it's training people for jobs that will be involved in the construction of a high-speed rail in California. For a long time, we've felt that we needed a high-speed rail. So I just thought I'd add those comments to these very important bills. Obviously, we have been involved at the start with those bills in the formation of the bills. As was pointed out, also I testified in front of the Senate Education Committee on behalf of the bill that had to do with energy management. And when Senator Alquist does her introduction of her bill, which is a regular session bill, I'll be happy to testify in that regard too if necessary. But anyway, these are a couple of things that I think these are jobs bills, and I think they'll be very helpful to the community college if they get it all the way through the process. The other bills she's talking about are bills as well. And by the way, we are also very fortunate to have in the legislature quite a number of individuals who are former community college trustees. We added two this year, Marty Block, who came from the San Diego area, and Paul Fong, who came, I believe, from Foothill de Anza. But we had Warren Farentani, who spoke this morning at the FACT breakfast and very eloquently and is a great friend of community colleges. He was in the LA Community College Board. Gloria Romero is a former LA Community College Board. Gloria Negrete McLeod is a former community college board member at Chaffey College. Denise DeChaney was a former community college, San Diego Community College person. Maybe leaving somebody else. Paul Cook, a rather new assembly member, is a former community college instructor. He comes from Copper Mountain area. So, and as a result, Warren Farentani has formed what's called the Community College Caucus. And I've spoken to them and talked to them. And so it's exciting to know we've got some friends in community college. Now, some of our fierce advocates for community college weren't necessarily community college trustees, but it really helps when you have somebody in the legislature who has that kind of knowledge. And if I've left out somebody, it wasn't intentional.
Oh, it's a long list.
It's a fairly long list.
It's impressive.
Member Thomas and then Member Paris.
Just a quick question on the energy management bill. Do either of you know, is there a timeline attached to that if it goes through and passes? a timeline on when those energy management systems
The
might?
implementation?
Yes.
Well, the bill's in the assembly right now, waiting to be heard. But the timeline is, I believe, and I'd have to check on this and get back to you, it might be an urgency bill, which would mean that it would go into effect right away because well, it would be special session. When the 8th special session adjourns, that would be when they go into effect. But it might be a 2/3 vote bill, which would mean it'd go into effect. Do you know?
Yeah, if I could, that's correct. The bill would be urgency bill, so it would take effect immediately. In terms of implementation in the districts, the proposal contemplates that most of the work would be done within a year. It's a 2-year total time frame under the requirements of the ARA funds, but we're going for an accelerated implementation. As part of the goal is to create jobs.
And save money, right.
And save money too,
Yeah,
but
thank
the creating jobs now definitely is a focus to that funding pot. Yeah.
Thank you.
Member Paris?
I think the energy management system is good from a high-level overview, but one of the critical pieces, and I'm wondering if there's some allocation of funding, is to create the technology infrastructure to support that. Lighting is one of the areas that causes the most energy use and is very costly. Vacancy sensors are going to be really critical to the colleges, as well as updating their lighting internally, as well as parking lot lighting. And in addition to that, the air conditioning system is another big piece that draws on it. So does part of the bill actually include any funding towards upgrading that infrastructure? Because the effectiveness of the management is only as good as the technology that you have in place to help reduce overhead costs.
Let me just say this. I did notice that the bill had also, it thought that it would involve, I believe it's 40-some-odd million because of the matching money that would come from utility companies. And of course, you're familiar with that. If we implement these things, a lot of it could be implemented as a result of the investor-owned and the municipally-owned utilities. So I recall years ago when I was president of Pasadena City College, they came to our campus and I remember a group that, a company that said, we will conduct a lighting inventory and we will promise you for an expenditure, and I can't remember the amount, but let's say $25,000, that you will get the money back within a year and a half, and then from then on, it's just profit. Now, we had sufficient reserves to do that because we thought, well, you know, to spend the money right now and then to have a perpetual reduction in our utilities made sense. So I'm not sure. I think the only thing this bill does right now is to do is to install the energy management systems. Do you have any more information on that, either Marlene or Eric?
Chancellor, you're correct. The focus really is putting these management systems in place, and that's the scope of this particular bill. We do have extensive programs going on with utilities that I know you're aware of, in which districts are accessing funds to upgrade lighting systems and implement other energy efficiency programs, and then receiving some support from the independently owned utilities for those activities. So we're pursuing on a different track.
Utilities will provide a rebate, but there has to be, to your point, Jack, there has to be an initial cost outlay to do the upgrade. So is there other ARA funding that's going to be utilized to leverage for those upgraded improvements? Because again, the energy management system is only as effective as the measures that they have in place, the technology to help manage it. So is there other funding that colleges have been allocated to do some of those upgrades? Do you know of?
At this point, there are not other ARA pots that I'm aware of that serve that function. Many colleges, and this builds on what the chancellor indicated, many colleges see these energy efficiency projects as self-funding, and so they take and they very much take into account those rebates from the utilities that they get in exchange for implementing the programs, in addition to just the reduction in baseline costs that are ongoing. And so, again, with our work with those rebate programs, we have kind of encouraged that matchmaking between community college districts, providers of efficiency systems, and the utilities in order to facilitate that. So we're kind of moving on a different track with that. But I agree, if another pot becomes available, it's one of those kind of win-win-win proposals where you get the environmental benefits, the fiscal benefits for colleges, and also the jobs benefits.
And I might also add that at Fullerton College, they did a pilot project, I believe involving 5 buildings, and they cut their cost from 35 to 40%. And part of it, oddly enough, was just knowing when to have the lights on and off. And of course, that doesn't cost a lot of money. But maybe you should have maybe the, the installation of lights that go immediately off when there's no motion in the room. Right. But it's interesting that that the data you can collect on, and that would be true in your home or wherever, but particularly a large utility user like a college, that the data you collect, there's a lot of efficiencies you can bring about that don't actually cost money. But we would hope that we could, through additional help from utilities and others, to implement the costs that might be involved in cutting down on energy usage.
One more point about the model that's emerging on these various kinds of training or energy programs or allied healthcare programs. The feds are requesting, the state is looking at developing funding models that include a portion from the states, a portion from the either private or philanthropic communities, and then a portion from the federal government. So I think local colleges will be exploring those options to supplement what they're able to get from the state. I don't anticipate that the state's going to be funding an additional fund source to do some of these things, but I think this is where the local innovation and creativity is going to come into play to try to find those resources.
I'm sorry, Member Larwood had a question or comment?
Yes, and sort of switch gears a little bit. Thank you for the report. I really appreciate it. It was good. I'm surprised, though, that there's nothing being put forward by the legislature, or at least you didn't mention it, regarding a topic that I've been hearing a lot about, in fact, in visiting in legislative office, the sort of systemic problem that we have of students who are taking more classes than they need to transfer, which is then a cost. It also then keeps someone in a seat longer, and we have students piled up waiting to get in those seats. Is there anything being done to address that? It occurs to me that part of the problem is counseling, and of course, counseling is cut always on times like this. But it would seem to me that we ought to start addressing that way in some way system-wide.
Member Larwood, you're absolutely right. That issue has been of great concern to many, and there are a number of transfer bills, actually, many of which are still spot bills. And as I mentioned, that the conversations behind the scene are, in fact, looking at that and other related issues as how you reduce the number of unnecessary courses a student takes in order to transfer, that it's a cost to the individual as well as to the state, an unnecessary cost. And trying to find ways to, for example, I know Chancellor Scott has taken a look at some other states, and the average number of courses a student takes for transfer is like 138 units, whereas at ours they're in close to 160. So it is an area that has been of great interest, and I have not heard about it appearing in legislation as of yet, or a particular proposal, but I know that there's a lot of thought being given to that. As a matter of fact, next week the master plan for higher ed will be holding a hearing that will focus primarily on transfer, and I'm certain that this issue and others will come up. It is a big concern to a lot of legislators. They're hearing from their constituents about how challenging it can be.
Is there a way that the system can come together to help guide this so that we don't get something that's difficult to enact?
Absolutely. We're in lots of conversations with members of the legislature who are asking questions about how you do that. I know the Academic Senate's thinking a lot about this, and other constituent groups within the community colleges, but we're certainly in our office, Linda Michalowski and others are having these conversations as technical experts. And we haven't had a chance to look at any specific legislation yet because, like I said, a lot of these bills are still in development.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments, Member McDonald?
Yeah, just as a follow-up, that was a good, what Chancellor Scott just made, the comment on the Community College Caucus. Can we get a list of those names? That would be a great tool to have also for us.
Sure, I'll be glad to. Right now I would only have to call on my memory, and sometimes that's a little faulty. So I'll try to get something.
That would be very, very beneficial to all.
But I will have to say I compliment Assemblymember Warren Faratani, who begat the idea. He said, "Why don't we have a community college caucus?"
Great idea.
And it isn't limited only to ex-trustees and ex-teachers. It includes some other members, but I don't have that right now, but I can get that to you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I was going to say it's lunchtime. Would this be an okay time to take a break, or would you like to finish up?
Why don't we do this? We can take a break? Sure.
Okay,
But before we go to take, I just want to give you a quick update on advocacy, and then I'll be done, and then Valerie can open when you return for lunch. Advocacy update. Many of you received a notification from us that typically we have our legislative reception in tandem with our advocacy day. We've rescheduled that for May 3rd at your next board meeting, Monday night, because of the speaker's swearing in activities tonight. So that would be rescheduled, and it'll be a good opportunity for us to evaluate how it works separating out these activities so that you have another interaction with legislators at your next board meeting. And then I just want to let you know that there are numerous advocacy efforts underway, particularly this week. We've had FAC, which had met yesterday and today, and there were about 200 members walking the halls today, advocating on behalf of community college issues. But we also have another event coming up on April 27th. This is an intersegmental advocacy day, and I would invite you, if you're interested, to let me know if you'd like to participate in that. This is where Chancellor Jack Scott and President Udoff and Chancellor Charlie Reed have all agreed to come out for this event, and we'll be meeting with various members of the legislature on April 27th. So you'll be receiving more information about that if you're interested. The students' March on March rally is scheduled for March 22nd, and at that point they're expecting thousands, and I've heard, estimates as much high as 10,000. And this would be all students from all segments, so that will be a big event here in the Capitol. And there'll be lots of activity going on in terms of advocacy this Friday, or rather March 4th in the Bay Area. Lots of activity there. Students and various community college constituents advocating on behalf of community college resources. So there's lots of activity. I think people are really out in force and conveying the same message about how important we are to the state's economic recovery. So that's I think that's a good set of activities that will be helpful for us.
Well, thank you very much. And
Jane, do you want to speak now, or do you want to wait till after the full report, or would you prefer to do it now?
My comment is pertinent to this point, but I'm happy to wait.
no, let's have her go now.
Come on.
Very brief.
I actually had a question that relates to advocacy. What, if any, position has the board taken, or conversations, Chancellor, have you had with the governor's office regarding the 10% guarantee from the general fund to the UC and CSU campuses and the potential of including community colleges? Has there been any discussion amongst the board and our position on that, and where are we heading in?
All right, there has been a discussion, not with the board, but I'll give you a little background on that. I had a conversation the day of that announcement with Susan Kennedy, the Chief of Staff. And I can tell you why the community colleges weren't included. I'm not sure it's a good reason, but I'll tell you the reason. It was because it was felt that the community colleges, as being a part of 98, had a guarantee that either UC or CSU did not have. And so the governor was making a statement that he thought there should be an initiative on the ballot that would guarantee that eventually 10% of the budget would be spent on UC and CSU and a lesser amount spent on prisons. Well, can I be very blunt and candid? I don't think that initiative is going to make it. I mean, I complimented the governor, and I didn't feel I was in a position, if he was speaking up for higher education, to take issue with him on this matter. I did, however, talk to the president of the University of California and to Chancellor Reed and said, if this occurs, we feel like there ought to be a guarantee in there for transfer students who come from the community college, and I got an oral commitment from them about that. Here's the problem with the initiative. Immediately, for instance, some of the Republican legislators disagreed with it because of their stand on crime, feeling that reducing prison expenditures would suggest that we're soft on crime, which, you know, I won't go into the arguments one way or the other on that. I can guarantee you that the CCPOA, that is the prison guards, would, if that initiative ever got on the ballot, they would fight that very strenuously. I think it was a good statement. It was a well-intentioned statement on the part of the governor, because I don't right now feel totally comfortable taking issue with something that I don't think is going to occur, if I can just be blunt with you. Since I think it's not going to occur, I don't think that, and I don't think the governor's been a friend to community colleges, and of course we know that there was a little exchange in the LA Times about that. He has been a friend to the community colleges, and in this year's budget, he asked for a 2.2% growth for community colleges. So that's kind of the, if you want me to give you the political background on it, I'll just be honest with you about the political background. I haven't generally spent a lot of ammunition on something that I'm not sure is going to happen. And so I'm just being honest with you here, and I don't think it was that the governor was actually taking a whack at the community colleges. I think his idea was, as was explained to me, and I wasn't in on the formulation of his speech. I was, however, informed that he was going to announce it, and so I did express some concerns about the fact that community colleges were not included, and I did get assurances that if this became reality, that there would be something in it that would guarantee a certain number of transfer, that it would have a pocket of money in there for transfer students. Now, I will go on to tell you that because we had some concerns about what's happening in CSU this semester in terms of transfers, that Chancellor Reed said that he was committed in the fall semester of 2010 that every community college transfer student who was eligible to get into CSU would get into CSU. Now, of course, as I've sometimes jokingly said, Sangoan one time said an oral commitment's not worth the paper it's written on. So, but I do have an oral commitment to that effect. Okay.
Thank you, Chancellor.
Okay. Maybe you always run a danger when you ask me a question to get more information than you ask for.
Never a danger.
Please.
Thank you, President Malumet and Chancellor Scott. Member Larwood raised, I think, a very important question about the excess units that students take, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to help point out how very complex the situation is for our students. As you know, 70 or maybe even 80% on some campuses, the students are assessed when they come into the college as pre-collegiate. They need to take basic math and English before they can then get into the regular programs, the collegiate transfer programs. Sometimes it takes the students a couple of years to get through that. So very often those are considered to be excess units. But indeed, we're meeting the need of basic skills students in the colleges. Another issue that really is, I think, the number one issue about transfer is capacity. And when students are taking excess units, sometimes it's because they can't get into the university, and they need to maintain their financial aid, and they need to maintain their status. Another reason for what some people call excess units is we know that students sometimes change their majors, or they come back to college to get another associate's degree, or to get into another because they got laid off from their jobs, etc. Another important factor is that our matriculation services have been slashed, as you know, and students are truly not getting the support services they need to make the right choices. And, you know, I think it's, since the main problem is capacity, the ideal case would be to solve the problem with more capacity, but we know that the financial situation is really difficult right now. I mean, I think ideally we want a solution that truly addresses the problem and doesn't create more work and more tasks at the colleges. I don't know if anybody's ever proposed a study to look at the issue of excess units, but it might be interesting to really try to pin that down and find out how many indeed are just taking fun classes versus how many are really filling all those sort of needs that they need to in order to transfer. Thank you.
Well, thank you. On that note, it is 12:15. I think it's a good time to take a lunch break, and we will come back here at 1 o'clock for Vice Chancellor Purnell's report, and at 1:30 is the Undersecretary of Veterans Affairs to join us. So, thank you.